A three-way is basically a switch that can be controlled from two locations. And for the simple fact, you can draw it a little bit differently than that, but I'll just do this at this point. So in other words, if this would go out here to your light, and then this would be your source. What's going to happen is you will have what's called, well, it's kind of hard to, different color. You'll have your source, or on the switch, if you looked at your three-way switches, you'll have 3 screws obviously on that switch. One of the screws on the switch will be what we call in the trade the point, or for this screw here will be a different color than the other two. These 2 screws will be similar in color. This screw here will be in a different color. It will be either black or some other color. So this would be your source. In other words, if this is your 120 volts coming in, and then your light here would pass through, and then you would have your neutral over here tied to that fixture. So this would be your black, and this here would be your white. And what happens on your three-way, and then these wires here are called travelers. And they can be different colors. Usually in our field, because we're installing pipe and pulling wire through conduit, with these 2 wires here, I like to use an oddball color. Pink, purple, something that doesn't really apply to your typical industry as far as colors. Like our colors in our field are going to be black, red, blue, white, and green, and brown, orange, yellow, gray, and green. So with these travelers, what I like to do is make them an oddball color. So when you pull that through a raceway, if you see a pink and purple wire, you know automatically what it is. Other companies can do other things. That's typically what we do. And how a three-way works is just what I'm doing here with the dashes is that's kind of like the internal position of the switch that you don't physically see. In other words, the shell of the switch is going to be like this. And then what happens is if you have your point or your source coming into the discolored screw, or what we call is the point, and then
that would be your common
terminal. Like you'll have, like this would be identified, these 3 screws would be identified. These 2 would be similar in color, and this one will be different than those 2. And that's what we call the point as a trade reference. And then these 2 terminals would become travelers. And all that is a simple thing. The reason they're called travelers is just allowing a conductive path from point A to point B. So in this case, if your source was here, the switch was in this position, it's allowing current to pass through to that position, which to that position or that position. At that point in time, the light would be on. Because you could see, and this obviously would be the white wire, the neutral of the other side of your fixture. If you would move any of these 2 switches, then it breaks that circuit. And then to add a 4-way in the center of it would be the same as doing this. And that switch actually switches that way, internally inside the switch. You don't see it, and you didn't go over that, but that would be, a 4-way would be the simple fact of if you're controlling it from multiple locations. In other words, you'd walk in the door to the classroom here, there'd be a switch at that door, and then there'd be a switch at the back door. The switch in the middle would be your 4-way. And you could have multiples of that. You could put 10 of them in there if you'd want, and it would still function the same way. But to make the 4-way work, you always have to have the 3-way at each end. That's the only way it's going to function. So by learning and understanding the 3-way, by adding a 4-way switch, and all that does at this point, if you would, how can I do this? If you would do it this way, then we would get rid of, just for the ease of looking at it, if your source came in here and the switch was in this position, it would travel to here, it would go up to there, through the switch though, across to there, down to there, and your light would be on. So this way, at this point, if you would change the position of this switch, or that switch, it would turn off, and vice versa. If you would change the position again, and it doesn't matter which one you change, it's going to change its state, whether it's on or off. Now, there's 2 ways you can do it, which in your book, I think were they taking the source to the light fixture first? and that's a matter of preference. Like residentially, it's a little bit trickier for me because residentially you have to think of the conductors that are in the cables you're working with. So a little bit of thought process has to happen, just the same as it would in our field, but at least in our field, if we make a mistake, I can pull another wire through the raceway. Sometimes residentially though, if you aren't thinking about the process or the end result when you're roughing it in, and say you put a 2-wire here instead of a 3-wire where you need it, now drywall's on and you can't change it. Or it's not, you can change it, but it's not as easy as a change as it could be in the first place. So you do want to think of your process in construction as far as building it. Basically, like the project that I just started on now, I was kind of jumping all over the place. Like I said, I was in New York last week. We're doing an addition and renovation to Lancaster City Hall. That project will be a 16-month project, so I'll be in there in Lancaster for about 16 months. The construction of the building is going to be very, very challenging for the simple fact that it's a lot of high ceilings, a lot of exposed ceilings, a lot of glass. So in the fact of when the building is being built, you have to figure out how you're going to get from point A to point B and have it concealed at the end. So when the finished product, they don't see exposed raceways and stuff like that. I mean, a little different than this application in gymnasiums and stuff like that, but this is, it'll be an interesting project to say the least.